Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Habit Finder Power Session Live. We are live and super excited to be with you guys today. As you're jumping on, I've got a couple of things that I want to share, but this is one of my favorite power sessions that I try to do about every month, once a month or so, where it is completely coaching on demand. So as you're jumping on, I want you to start thinking about questions you've got. What are you dealing with? What are you working with? What's frustrating you? Hey, everybody. What's working? What's not? Where do your thoughts have you? What's been consuming your mind? All of that. So please start thinking of questions that I could serve you with taking head on in this power session, and start throwing them in the chat, and I will do my best to get through as many of them as possible. Oftentimes we'll find a theme or a string of themes from people's questions, and I'll dive a little bit deeper in terms of how they're all connected. But super excited to see all of you here. Hello. Super excited for the power session today. I just said super excited like 3 or 4 times within 10 seconds, so I'll try to avoid that one from here on out. But it is a beautiful day, a wonderful week, and I was going to say super excited to be with you, but I just said it anyway. As you're logging in, again, this is our coaching on demand power session, where you as participants, you being here live, get the opportunity to extort me as your personal coach today. I've got a couple of things I want to share with you that kind of are a nice added tool and perspective from what we've been talking about in the last few power sessions, but this is all for you, okay? Rita said, what does my mind not say? I'm here and thinking of questions. Okay, so any questions that you guys have that I could serve you with, please throw them in the chat. Okay. Oh, Chris is calling tabs already. Love it. For those of you, oh, thanks. My wife says I look handsome. I'm all set. I'm done. See you guys. Have a great day. No, but tabs, for those of you who don't know, who haven't been on these power sessions consistently, is our safe word, because my mind, actually, I see Kelly Rife on here right now, and she said one of my favorite things that keeps me in check. I have a lot of pack to my punch, and Kelly is one of those brilliant, wonderful, amazing people I know, and I know she's learned to be careful with the pack to her own punch. So it was incredible guidance. And so what we have is a safe word. When I'm putting too much pack in my punch, you can say tabs, and that's my indicator that I've gone down a rabbit hole, that it's just flying over people's heads, or it's too much, and we want to keep things simple on here. So, but as you're jumping on, I want to make sure. Oh, thank you, Miriam, sharing such a nice message. Hey, Kelly. Calm down over there. Anyway, as you're jumping on, this is our Coach Demand session. I try to do this about once a month or so, where this is a session completely dedicated to you. What do you need? What do you want? What are you focused on? So you'll want to take advantage of the chat, okay? Let's see here. I just got way out of my way on your loving suggestion. Thank you for not withholding, or perhaps for withholding until exactly the right moment. Awesome. Crystal, thinking with the theme of Agape Love, what would you suggest for someone who is working with a person who has deeply hurt you? They want nothing more than to run away, but they can't. They work together. Ooh, that's a good one. Okay. Wow. Crystal, you're throwing a fastball, a heavy hitter right at me right off the bat. So, all right. First of all, let's cover a couple ground rules in terms of the context of what we're talking about here. Crystal was asking about agape love. Okay. This is the quintessential principle that we coach on. So just a quick review for people that aren't familiar. Agape love is a Greek word. It's the highest form of love. In the English language, we only have one word. It's love. In the Greek language, there are several, and the highest form is agape. What's interesting about agape love is it's the only love, okay, that is not emotionally driven. It's not emotionally driven. It's a heightened level of awareness. It's a clarity. It's an accuracy, an ever-increasing level of accuracy and clarity to be able to step away from our own noise, our own thought processes that show up when we're trying to connect with people, that make it difficult to do. If you're curious what your noise is specifically, you're in luck. We can measure that scientifically as accurately as the thermometer can tell you what temperature it is outside. with the Habit Finder, which is the page you're on here. And if you haven't done so, make sure you jump onto habitfinder.com, where you can measure what your thought process is, what your noise sounds like, what risks, what strengths there are. And in particular to Agape Love, you're going to want to be considering the noise in the myself section, which is the mental construct of your self-worth or your self-esteem. Self-worth and self-esteem oftentimes gets lost on this fluffy, ethereal, energy ambiguousness of self-value or confidence or whatever you might use to call it. It's actually a set of thought processes. And the noise in those thought processes either support or sabotage your ability to clearly connect with your own self, your own real, genuine, authentic self. So Agape Love is applied to both others and to ourselves. So that's agape. It's the highest form of love. It's unemotional, or it's not unemotional. It's not emotionally driven. And it's an opportunity to be able to see someone. It often gets associated as God's love. If you Google it, you'll see a lot of references to that. That was later adopted because what's more accurate, what's more clear, what's more heightened level of awareness than God or whoever that is for you, whatever power that is for you. So agape love is what Crystal's referencing. So thinking with the theme of agape love, this heightened level of awareness, what would you suggest for someone who is working with a person who has deeply hurt them? They want nothing more than to run away, but they can't. They work together. Now, this is a really challenging one on a lot of levels. One, because I don't know the context. And Crystal, I don't know, I wouldn't want you to share anything specific on here, obviously, but I don't know the context of what was done to hurt them. But here's one thing that might help, okay? A couple basic principles just to get the wheels turning. And that is one thing that I actually teach my children, my three daughters constantly. I don't mind, well, I mind, but I'm not as concerned about people verbally bullying them because that's a thought process. What I will not tolerate is physical bullying. When it's verbal, it's oftentimes how it's received. When it's physical, it doesn't matter how you receive it. It's dangerous. And here's one of the first things that I always teach my daughters and that I've taught people in situations like this. And the first realization is that hurt people hurt people. That's the first principle of applying agape love in a situation like this, without knowing the details of this particular situation, Crystal, okay? But the first, because what we're wanting to introduce first, okay? The first thing we want to introduce, the reason for agape love is the initial thing that it introduces is perspective. We want to introduce perspective, and phrases and ideas and thoughts and becoming aware of those things can really help assist us in shifting perspective, which Marianne Williamson, one of my favorite authors, talked about as one of the greatest miracles we can create in life, is just a change in our perspective, okay? So we shift our perspective and we consider hurt people hurt people. So what does that do for you? Now, we're not considering this to just tolerate them, to just settle for their behavior and set ourselves up to get hurt again. We talked about this last week or the week before, both in fact, I think, of this all or nothing. Well, first of all, let's point out that the enemy to agape is systemic thinking. Because systemic thinking is that all or nothing, right or wrong. That's likely what created some of the most friction and the most pain in the relationship or in the offense that there could have been. And so we're not introducing agape to ignore the offense, to pretend that it didn't hurt so bad or anything else that isn't a heightened level of awareness. We're using this just initially to create perspective, not to rationalize it away, not to numb it, not to justify it, but to detach ourselves from systemic thinking. We're using the shift in perspective to get the systemic clause of all or nothing, right or wrong, life or death, and elevate our minds. Perspective can allow our minds to elevate from that systemic construct of all or nothing to an extrinsic. So we want to go from systemic and elevate to an extrinsic. an extrinsic dimension, which is practical judgment, common sense, to be able to consider things. So this perspective can help us start to break that down, that hurt people hurt people. So what that tells me is it allows me to begin, just begin to understand. Begin to understand where the other person's coming from. Begin to understand what they might be experiencing in their lives. Now, this does not mean condone or agree with, and it's the reason we need to get the systemic thinking, the all or nothing, out of our thought process in this case, by shifting our perspective. Because if we don't, we can't understand. Because understanding is an intrinsic awareness. And systemic is just all or nothing, all or nothing. When there's this beauty in between of understanding, that doesn't mean you agree with what they did. Doesn't mean you condone what they did. But you can start to understand it. And when we can understand it, we can have the capacity to address it. If we're stuck in systemic thinking, especially if we don't know it, we're in that all or nothing, right or wrong. We need to be right about the way they hurt us. We're not going to understand where they were coming from. We're certainly going to want them to understand the pain it caused us. We're going to want them to understand what we went through. And somehow, and sometimes even have ourselves convinced that if they would just understand that, then we'd be willing to understand them. And we get into that systemic battle in a more complex way. But we want to release that and go into extrinsic, common sense, practical judgment by creating a stronger perspective. And if we can stay in that space, we just might create an intrinsic understanding. We might just realize that we weren't hurt by them, okay? We were hurt by their wall of resistance. Mandino talked about the wall of resistance, about building walls around our hearts to protect us, because the world can be a painful place, especially if we're too trusting or naive or ignorant or not realizing how our unhealthy habits of thinking created some of our worst nightmares. So we've created these walls of resistance. We all have them. Every single person has one. Everybody. And when we can shift our perspective to start to realize that we weren't necessarily hurt by them, we were hurt by their wall of resistance. Why did they have a wall of resistance? And why did they have such a thick wall of resistance with archers on top and hot boiling oil that they poured over on us and we got hurt? Because hurt people hurt people. And so similar to what I tried to create with my daughters is I want them to be able to have an understanding of where it's coming from. I don't want them to learn to get thick skin and ignore what other people say. And that happens all the time. I get clients that'll say, Paul, I wish I didn't care so much about what people think. Okay? Yeah, you do want to care what people think. You don't want to worry about what people think. You don't want to allow what other people think to impact your own real, genuine, authentic belief in yourself. So whether you agree with it or not, teaching my daughters this has been an incredible strength for them, so that when someone is mean to them, they don't get triggered. They don't need to go into their own space. They don't, all the challenges of what society's creating right now in needing to coddle and all this crap. I mean, that's really what it is. It's a lack of understanding. It's I need you to understand me. And if we all start walking around with I need you to understand me, then we get the world that we live in today. Because it's not that we want them to really understand them. We want them to understand us. We want them to agree with us. Okay, we want them to be to do the way we want it done. And so, but understanding that hurt people allows us to create some understanding, some agape love for what they might be going through. Now, this doesn't always lead to resolution. This doesn't always lead to peace, because every once in a while you run into what we refer to as a rattlesnake. And you don't put a rattlesnake in your sleeping bag because they bite you. That's just what they do. But there are probably a lot of people in your life, including this person, Crystal, because the majority of the time it's the case, where we have deemed them a rattlesnake and they weren't. They weren't a rattlesnake that bit. They were a hurt person that had a wall of resistance that we didn't really enjoy running into. And there might be an opportunity to bring that wall down and get behind it. if we can get behind it, we can actually connect with the real person, or at least get the clarity that they were doing them, and that it shouldn't be a reflection on the way it hurt us. Even if it felt super intentional, there are a lot of irrational things that we do. And when our survival or our status is on the line, the amount of irrationalization and the level of that irrational behavior goes way up. Okay? So I've been stuck on this comment to make sure I didn't lose the question. Okay, Lisa said quieting the mind and finding focus. Okay. Hang on one second. I want to make sure I don't lose some of these as I scroll down, because I know I've got a bunch of comments to get caught up on, but hopefully this was helpful with that initial one. Thank you, Crystal. So quieting the mind and focus. Okay. Good morning, Diane. Awesome. Love these. Thanks, Lisa. Systemic clause. Oh, yeah. It's like being in observation. We have so many big decisions to be made. We go back and forth all day, every day. Where to live, business, vehicles, mostly money. It's exhausting, and clarity and answers do not come. We get overwhelmed and we do nothing, even when we know moving forward change is required. How important is waiting for clarity before action? That's a great question. Begin to understand where they're coming from can be such a challenge sometimes. Oh, for sure, Paige, 100%. This is high level agape. This is really tough stuff in terms of, because you're getting every reason to be offended. You're getting every reason to retreat or to fire back or whatever the case is. This is not easily done. I don't mean to make it sound simple in the fact that you just turn around and now go to your worst enemy and just, it's going to be amazing. This takes steps. It takes a while to unring that bell. I have to step out of me and choose to want to understand them, for sure. If you can't help, at least don't hurt. Indeed. Okay. Yes, great point, Rosanna, that a lot of hurt people don't even realize that's what they're doing. Or some of them are even hurting others unconsciously and sometimes even consciously to get other people to not like them or hurt them back, because somehow that would distract them from their pain inside and getting in. And it's just it's a distraction game. So it's certainly an opportunity to really understand some deep stuff. Okay, so let's cover these two real quick, and then any others, please throw them in the chat. So quieting your mind and focus. Okay, for those of you who have taken your habit finder, I want you to look at the structure section. Okay, it's the last section in the habit finder, the sixth section, the third in the outer world. And I want you to look at the third measurement down, called analytical. Remember, for those of you who have taken the habit finder, this is not saying whether you are analytical or not. This is a thought process that we have titled analytical. We're calling it analytical because it's way easier than calling it by its mathematical equations, okay? And so calling it analytical is measuring this thought process, and we're measuring the risk. That's what we're doing in the habit finder. What's the risk based on how this thought process thinks? If it's right in the middle, then it's very little risk, very little to no risk. That doesn't mean you're optimizing it or totally engaging that thought process. But for those of you who are at risk of it going to the right, to obsessive, what that means is that you are at risk of having a mind that never shuts up, constantly, obsessively thinking about new and better ways to do things. A very, very active mind, okay? This equals a very active mind. Now, just because you don't have this measurement doesn't mean that you can't have an active mind. Just like if you were to go into the My Dreams section of your habit finder and look at the third measurement down, intentional, which is connected to this one, mirrored in certain ways, and it moves and it doesn't move to the right to fantastical, that doesn't mean you can't dream fantastically. It just means you're not at risk of having it happen uncontrollably or automatically or unconsciously. That's the risk, is that your mind is just running at 1,000,000 miles an hour constantly, making it very difficult to feel like you can control it. Now, how do you quiet a mind like that? Okay, well, number one, okay, this is where we get into the other than. The other than mentality. Okay, the other than mentality, okay, you can read that. Oh, the other than mentality is one of the top challengers to real growth, to changing your mindset. Because it sounds like this. The most classic one is losing weight, okay, getting healthy. So other than eating right and exercising, how do I lose weight? Other than going to school and studying and getting good grades, how do I get a degree? Other than, and we do it in so many different ways. And I run into this one, okay? So you want to become aware of your other than mentalities in life. Because even if you don't actually say it out loud, your very active mind is not just obsessively thinking about new and better ways to do things. It's thinking about new and easier ways to do things. Because the majority of the population, one of their top goals unconsciously is ease, okay? We want ease, also known as comfort, also known as freedom. Those are really dangerous things to seek. And I don't mean patriotic freedom. I don't mean Viktor Frankl freedom. I mean the standard definition of freedom, a lack of resistance. Okay? I don't mean comfort in terms of love. I mean comfort as a destination, ease as a destination where somehow suddenly you won't have any responsibilities anymore. As if there's some place where you could get where you'd have enough money to be totally irresponsible with your money and enough time to be totally irresponsible with your time. Okay? It doesn't exist. But this very active mind is working hard to get there. Because this is what this especially, ease, is what your brain appreciates most. Your brain wants the easiest way to predict how you're going to function, what's going to happen. So let's back up a little bit. I'm going to tabs myself, okay? Back up a little bit. I think this was Lisa asking about quieting your mind. Here's the other than answer, meaning it's the most effective and the one we hate to hear first. The first one, required to quiet your mind, is patience. Patience is required to quiet your mind. Number two is perspective. Again, there's that beautiful P word as a key to being able to master our own mind. And you master your own mind, you master your emotions. You master your own emotions, you can master your own behaviors. You master your behaviors and you will succeed at anything that you want. That's why we start with the mind. That's why we start as far upstream as you can get with thoughts. Now, if you've got incredibly active thoughts, more than likely they've got a bias to these three things, which creates even more noise and dysfunction and contradiction in your life, which makes it even more difficult to have these two things. But first, okay, patience is the commitment, okay? So this is the commitment. You're making a commitment to be patient, meaning you're not going to start trying to quiet your mind and then sit there and go, oh my gosh, it's just been 30 seconds. Quiet, mind. Be quiet. Be quiet. It's been 40 seconds. When is my mind going to quiet? So we're making a commitment to not sit there and have some expiration date on our patience and our focus. We're going to be willing to figure this out. Okay? This mind is going so fast, even out of control for some of us, it's going to take some time to ease that in. Okay? But you don't jump in a car that's headed the wrong direction and yank the steering wheel the other direction, okay? Because then you roll. We want to be able to slow down and ease into it. So the commitment is patience. It's going to take some time for you to, as I mentioned before, to unring this bell. It's going to take you some time to be able to be okay with some of your greatest gifts, because how active your mind is one of your greatest gifts. That's a bar that when it moves over to the right, we don't try and move back to the middle. We just want to be able to understand it so it can be managed better. It's a great gift, and great gifts can be risky. Most of the challenges and difficult things in your life come from your greatest gifts, your greatest strengths that just happen to be out of control. So patience is so important. The brain shifts and moves incrementally. Our conscious mind, our prefrontal cortex, the creativity, the practical judgment, the gifts that we've got, the ability to receive inspiration and be metacognitive and all that fancy stuff, okay? That doesn't have the same limitations that your core operating system do in your brain. Your core operating system is a slave to habits. That's what Og said. Those were his words, a slave to habits. And then he went on to say that if I'm going to be a slave to habits, I should be a slave to good habits. And then continue to lay out some of the most powerful principles in the world and the greatest salesman in the world in the 10 scrolls on how to do that. But the challenge is we've got our core operating system, and then on top of that, we've got this amazing level of consciousness that we can have. And that's going to dictate and influence our core operating system, but it takes time. It's like the dripping water that wears away at the rock, or as Og even said it in the scrolls, the ant that can devour a lion. It takes time. As he went on to say, we may be hacking at a mighty oak with childish swipes and feel like it's not doing anything, but eventually, if we have that consistency, then the mighty oak will fall. So the key to patience is understanding that frequency, meaning consistency, is frequency beats intensity. Your brain, to win this game against some of your core operating systems, some of your unhealthy habits of thinking, requires frequency, aka consistency, over intensity. But your conscious mind can run 100 miles ahead of your life and ahead of what's possible, and can create an orphanage in Africa in 2 seconds, and can build a multi-million-dollar business in 2 seconds. And so it's almost taught to be impatient, especially when it's this active. Okay? So we're going to make a commitment, Lisa, to be patient. Because the only thing worse than trying to quiet your mind is impatiently trying to quiet your mind. And in fact, often our minds, we have a difficult time quieting them because we're impatient. And then we get into a chicken or the egg conversation, but it doesn't matter. We have a chicken and an egg, so we don't need to figure out whether your impatience caused your active mind or your active mind created your impatience, okay? So now we've got frequency over intensity and a commitment to be patient. So then the only thing left is the perspective. And allow me to help you shift that. So perspective for quieting your mind. Okay? So here's you. And here is your mind. Okay? Very active, like a really integrated highway is your mind. Okay? Here's the challenge. When we've got a really active mind, these tend to blend. Okay? And it ends up like this. Here's you. Here's your mind. And we lose us in our really active mind. So when we say quiet your mind, we figure out how to quiet us and our mind and slow it down and stop it. You're not going to slow down your mind. You're not going to turn down the volume on your mind, but you can put yourself in a position to observe it. For example, have you ever seen a car chase on TV or in a movie, and it didn't affect you emotionally? You were just able to observe it and watch it. Well, imagine if at the snap of a finger you were in that car, and it actually was happening, and you were in that car. Your emotional reactions, your noise, okay, quieting your mind would probably be really, really difficult. Yet some of us can turn on television. There's even a car chase scene, and we can zonk out if we're tired enough because we allowed our mind to quiet down because we were in an observational state. Here's where it gets tough for people. This is the shift in perspective. You quieting your mind is not directly injecting quiet into what your mind is trying to grab onto and think and do and analyze. That doesn't ever stop until you're dead. What you do is take your true voice, who you are, and step back so you can observe it. Then you are quiet. Doesn't matter what your mind is doing at that point. Now it's like watching it on the movie screen, watching it on the TV. You're able to step back from your mind and observe it so it can quiet down. Meaning it quiets down in terms of the reaction it's creating in you, the impatience it's creating in you, the anxiety, the stress, the overwhelm that it's creating in you, to be able to step back and just observe it. It's amazing when you stop trying to quiet your mind that it actually gets a little quieter. When you stop trying to control your mind, it actually gets a little bit quieter. This is one of the key principles in transcendental meditation and yoga and other things, where it's not about not thinking anything. That's the perspective that doesn't serve, is people were taught that quieting your mind meant not thinking anything. It all has to do with the perspective. Rather than being in the mess, like in the car chase on the TV, you're going to step back and sit in the recliner and watch it and observe it. The show still happens, but it feels very different, quieter even, when you can observe it rather than be in it. So those of you who have a difficult time quieting your mind, first and foremost, you've got to make a commitment to be patient. But secondly, you've got to make sure you have the right perspective. You're not trying to go in and jam a rod into the wheels and cogs of your mind to get it to stop. That you would die, okay? What you're doing is putting yourself in an observational position. And when we do that, it's amazing how we get emotionally separated from it, which can cause us to be able to we are in a quiet place and we're observing our mind no matter how noisy it wants to be. And when you do that well enough, eventually you can get to the point where you can actually turn the volume down. But first, let's get you out of the car chase. Let's get you out of the craziness of actually being in it and get yourself into an observational place. And this requires practice, okay? And it's difficult if you don't bring patience. It's impossible if you don't bring patience into it. For those of you who've done yoga and meditation, you'll sit there and just not try and force your mind to go anywhere, and then all of a sudden it goes into this peaceful state. And then it's almost when you realize that it went into this peaceful state that you kick it back out. But that's fine. We're committed to being patient. We know that we only need a few moments of a quiet mind to be able to be in an exponentially more powerful place for the rest of the day. It's pretty awesome. Jason. That's awesome. Very cool. Shout out to Jason Cisneros, my man, our business consultant. Oh, he doesn't like the term consultant the same way I don't like the term life coach, because he's way more than that and way more talented. So much room for that giant head. Awesome. Let's see here. Notice him so we can pipe. This is awesome. I'm just catching up on the chat. Sorry, guys. You guys saw this probably a few minutes ago. So if you've been wronged and you know you're right about it, how do you stop the internal need or drive to want others to know that you are right? The need to be right runs deep, especially if you've been wronged. Ooh, that's that systemic thinking, Crystal. And it is hard to surrender because it fights hard to hang on. It's at the core of that operating system we were talking about, the core of your brain. That's how it operates. Fight or flight, right or wrong, all or nothing. The amygdala, the basic hard-coded part of your brain. One of the advantages that we have is language, because that part of the brain only has feelings, instinct. It doesn't have language. So something as simple as possibly asking yourself, Crystal, what would my life be like if I could let go of the need to be right about the way they wronged me? What would that feel like? And just introducing that concept to your brain through language out loud gives you the upper hand. It doesn't get rid of the feelings. It doesn't get rid of the offense. It just makes it a fair fight. Observer's chair all the way. If you haven't read that, go onto our website and get a copy of the Observer's Chair. It's all about what we're talking about. My granddaughter needs to learn this. Could help with her ADHD. Oh, thank you, Sally. That is such an over-diagnosed thing. It's like personality tests. You know, it's like, oh, well, see, this says I'm a high this and a low that. See, that's why I'm a jerk. No, or ADHD. See, that's why I'm always off task. And it's almost like it gives an excuse or a label to it rather than the capacity to understand it. I've worked with some of the wealthiest, most successful people in the world, and almost all of them have a form of ADD or ADHD. Now, I'm not dismissing the very clinical nature of extreme cases. I'm not that ignorant, okay? But I know that it's perpetuated by giving a diagnosis and especially medication rather than principles and tools in many cases. Not all. Similar to depression, massive sensitivity and respect and empathy for the clinical levels of those challenges. It's just oftentimes overdone. If you're sitting there going, I'm never going to be super successful because I've got ADD or I've got ADHD, I'd love to introduce you to some incredible CEOs, some amazing owners who own that, who love that part of them. And what they understand, something Jason teaches beautifully in his business growth course, is being able to build a team around you so that you can actually take advantage of that as one of your gifts, as one of your strengths. If it's just a handicap, if it's a diagnosis, you don't get to find the light in it. You don't get to find the beauty in it, which makes it impossible for you to build the infrastructure around you in your life that can support it. So glad you brought that up. Super powerful. So this is a good plan for responding when people seem hurtful. Get out of systemic thinking, right or wrong, good or bad. Remember, hurt people. To shift your perspective, you aren't necessarily hurt by them. You are likely hurt by their wall of resistance. Step into agape for them as a being. Remember to have agape for self. Get into curiosity. What's going on with them? What's the hurt leading to their wall of resistance? Yes. Beautifully summarized. Thank you, Paige. Really simple perspective to be able to start considering this. Now understand, agape love is clarity. Okay? It's clarity. It's not necessarily a warm, fuzzy blanket. But we want to make sure that we're not reacting to their wall of resistance by throwing our wall up, and then we're exchanging blows and we're playing rock, spear, rocket, bomb, where they threw a rock at us, so we threw a spear back at them, and they launched a rocket at us, and we dropped a bomb. That's the risk of systemic thinking. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to prove what they did to us, and they're doing the same thing. Only to realize we were both feeling really similarly, but impossible to understand because we were feeling systemic about it. So, beautiful summary. What is the first step in working with a client that has an obsession with her perspective that is not serving her opposite to her goal? So I'm going to come to that in just a second, Rosanna, because I don't want to miss, just because it's beautiful for our very active minds, what Carla, I think it was Carla, that asked about clarity before action. Because this one's super simple, okay? There are basic principles in life, okay? Like, for example, every day, basic principle, every day you have the choice to escape or engage. Okay? We escape because we seek comfort, and in the pursuit of comfort, we run into confusion, and then we become convinced that it's our circumstances, and then we end up consuming. We become a consumer. We consume things. We consume mindless television. We consume bad food. We consume unhealthy relationships, whatever, because all we wanted to escape. If we engage, okay, then we find clarity, find inspiration, we find passion, we find growth, and we find success. Okay? Also known as creation. So, which one involves action? The risk is when it gets disguised, meaning, oh, I need to find clarity, which is an escape, the way it was delivered. I need to find clarity before I can act. Well, if we turn this way because we need to find more clarity before we can take action, then we know we're seeking comfort. We're going to run into confusion. We're going to be convinced that our circumstances need to shift before we could ever find clarity. And we're going to end up consuming things, consuming our time, consuming unhealthy food, consuming unhealthy relationships, so on and so on. Or we can choose to take action on basic principles. Now, it's really important to step back and make this really simple in this particular case, Carla, because I saw you were looking at house, where to live, money, different things. Well, what is the most basic need? What's the most basic need that you have right now? For example, one of our basic needs is to make money. Sounded like a lot of the things that you were talking about would be served by making money or even making more money. So how can you engage in that pursuit in a way that could provide clarity, inspiration, passion, growth, success, and creation that comes along the way of taking action? I'm not telling anyone to just go blindly take action, but I'm telling you, if you back off from the systemic thinking, again, there it rears its ugly head again, and step back from systemic thinking, which loves to use confusion to keep you in systemic thinking. I don't know what I should do. Well, that's usually when the best answer is do anything. Do something. As long as it's something that is choosing to engage, meaning it contributes. This is a really important list, so I'll add this. Okay. Do something, do anything, as long as it connects you to people, it contributes to the world, it serves, adds value, to name a few. Do that. What can I do today? Overwhelm, the number one cause of overwhelm, is our mind's ability to think about everything we need to do to get to a certain result or to get to where we want to go, or to even just to manage the life that we have. And what happens is, imagine the paper is flat down, okay? It's a flat map that we can see, step 1 to 100, for example. And then what we do is we lift it up and feel like it's going to fall on us, because then we're thinking about everything we need to do to be able to succeed. When we think about all of it, we get a jam, okay? The funnel of our mind just gets jammed, and we get jammed into confusion. We get jammed into stress, jammed into overwhelm, and we start escaping. We're at tremendous risk to escape, versus making things super simple and engaging in something that connects us to people, engage in anything that contributes to the world, that serves, and that adds value. Adds value to you, your family, people around you. And start simple. Because the less you do, the less action you take, the more confusion you'll feel, the more contention there will be, and the more focus there will be on your circumstances, and the more of a victim of right or wrong decisions that we can become. Now, some of you may want to take a look at the My Dreams section. And if the first measurement in your habit finder in My Dreams, the first measurement, self-directed, is over to the left to obligated, that's creating a heavy weight on you. That is creating the unconscious desire to escape. Or if you go to the bottom to steadfast, if that measurement moves over to the left to hesitant, then you're at risk of being worried you're going to make the wrong decision. So you're not doing anything because you're worried that it might be the wrong decision. So you escape into your mind. Oh, we need to analyze this more. We need to think about this more. But not doing the simple things that connect, contribute, serve, and add value. Then we'll do it if excellent, the second measurement in My Dreams, moves over to the right to perfection. Then we'll procrastinate and we'll put it off because there's no way we can connect, contribute, serve, and add value perfectly. So we procrastinate for fear that we're not going to be able to measure up to that perfection that's in our mind. That no matter how consciously you believe perfection isn't possible, that thought process doesn't care. Okay? Hope that helps. All right? So clarity before action is a dangerous thing. There's some things you want to think through, but if you feel it leading to more confusion, more of a focus on your circumstances, and especially the symptom of consumption, then you know that you've been choosing to escape. And it's time to start super simple with the basics of connection, contributing, serving, and adding value. What are the basics? Well, we're not sure we want to sell our home. Okay, well, whether you're going to sell it or stay in it, okay, add value to it. Why wouldn't you want to add value to the home you're going to stay in? Why wouldn't you want to add value to the home that you're going to sell? So start simple and just start doing the things around the house that you would want done regardless. Really simple place to start. Okay. Or start simple with, we're not sure if we should spend money on that. Well, either way, you're going to want to save money. So how are your finances looking? How clear are you in how healthy and focused you are in terms of what you need and what you want, and having a healthy balance there, so you don't fall risk to being a consumer. Okay. Hopefully you can start to step back from this and consider that. Now, if any of this isn't hitting home, part of the challenge is because we would be diving really deep with you individually. And if any of these things are stuff that you feel is holding you back from a huge prize in life, you've got a great business that you know you could just, if you could just overcome some of these obstacles, that you'd be off to the races, that you'd financially and health-wise and everything else. If you find yourself in that space with what we talked about today, it's time to consider coaching. It's time to consider getting in one of our groups or getting into one of our one-on-one coaching to be able to really dive deep and take you on. Is it a major investment? Yeah. But people are spending 3 times what we charge for coaching, 10 times what we charge for coaching to get a college degree that doesn't even guarantee them anything other than statistics that have said you'll make more money with this than without it. So the lifetime value of you being able to remove these barriers, if you're ready, which require a very similar commitment to what we've been talking about today. Coaching on the level that we do, that creates the results that we do that are very uncommon, requires patience and perspective. Patience is your commitment. Perspective is what we're going to help you shift, because that lays the groundwork for healthy habits of thinking. And healthy habits of thinking, being a slave to good habits, is going to allow you to create success in all ventures. Okay? What is the first step in working with a client that has an obsession with her perspective, that is not serving her opposite to her goal? Well, first, Rosanna, is going to be exploring your own need to be right. Because often we notice other people's really quickly when we've got a challenge with it ourselves. And when we want to explore our own perspective, like, why is what I have to say or what I think more important than theirs? So we want to examine that first. It doesn't mean it's not valid. It doesn't mean you can't share it. It just means oftentimes we're hearing more and more from people's obsession and their perspective when they are concerned that it's not landing, that you're not understanding it, that they're not being heard. That's super important. So when I have a split second of quiet mind and then jump back into busy, confused mind, are you saying I'm making some progress because of that split second? I just need more split seconds? Yes, Charlene, absolutely. Incremental. But what we do is we get that split second and then it goes away, and all we do is focus on the fact that I could only maintain it for a split second. I'm such a loser. I can never do that, rather than going, oh, that split second was great. And with how fast your mind works, a split second can be as powerful as an eternity, because of how, your mind doesn't care about time. It manipulates time all the time. Your mind doesn't operate on time. That's why you can go to something you're not that excited about and it can feel like it takes hours. And then you can go to something you're excited about and feel like it flew by in 15 minutes. The mind doesn't care about time, okay? The mind just cares about what you are celebrating, what you're focused on, what you're creating. So celebrate that split second, and it just might turn into 2. And then that 2 might turn into 4, and that 4 might turn into 8, which brings me to one of my favorite analogies. Do you know how many times you have to fold a piece of paper for it to reach from here to the moon? Anybody? How many times you have to fold a piece of paper for it to reach here from the moon? Now, you couldn't possibly fold a piece of paper this many times, but if you take a thin piece of paper, okay, and you fold it in half, and you fold it in half, how many times would you have to do that for it to reach from here to the moon? It's like 37 or 42, somewhere between there, 37 or 42. It's way lower than people would think, because of the exponential growth of each time you fold it in half. A split second today could be 5 minutes next week and could be an hour next year, and then the game totally changes. But we're not going to get there if we don't commit to be patient and have the perspective of celebrating those things. Ugh, I hate systemic thinking. Well, those are the only 2 options. You either love it or you hate it. Or we can step back from even that systemic thinking, Crystal, and appreciate it, because there are a lot of benefits to systemic thinking. Hate labels for people. Amen to that. Our struggles are our biggest gifts, for sure. So help. Thank you. Being okay with this gift of overthinking. Absolutely. So good. Please repeat the first measurement. Shoot, which one was Marilyn? Which one was I talking about? Oh, you'll listen again. Okay. All right. Woo! What a day. This was fun. Okay. Thanks for the great questions. Thanks for the interaction, for the opportunity to be able to take on what's been on your mind. Again, keep coming to the power sessions. About every 4 or 5 weeks, I'll throw in one of these on-demand sessions, and you'll be able to throw questions out as to where you're at and what's going on. But again, if you haven't taken the Habit Finder, take it. You can meet with one of my specialists for free. Okay. Will they talk to you about coaching? Yes, only if they feel like that's the right step for you, because they work with thousands of people. And so trust them to be able to understand whether that's something you should be considering or not. Who makes the ultimate decision in the end? You do. But they don't need to sell you into coaching. They're spending time evaluating whether that's a worthwhile investment for you. But before they can even evaluate that, they've got to help you understand your habit finder. They want to create a win for you in terms of understanding your habits of thinking. Because if we can't create a win for you with that, then why would you want to do the coaching? But if anything we talked about today feels like if I could just get that out of my way and be off to the races, then let's talk. Let's talk about coaching. Okay. Thanks everybody for being on the power session today. Love you all. Have a great day. And we'll see you next week. Take care.